Okay, so let's unpack this. We often have this very specific mental model of progress, right?
Right.
Whether we're talking about technology or evolution or sports history, we tend to visualize it as this smooth, upward-sloping line.
Oh, absolutely. The linear progression myth, the idea that things just naturally get a little faster and a little stronger and a little more organized every single year.
Exactly. It feels inevitable. Like, of course, athletes today are better than athletes in 1950, and they were better than athletes in 1900. But when I was going through the stack of notes and records you sent over for today's deep dive, I realized that model is actually kind of broken.
This.
History isn't a ramp, it's a staircase.
That is a much better analogy.
And sometimes you hit a step that is so steep, a vertical cliff face really, that the world before that step and the world after it look like two completely different planets.
We call those pivot points. And in the history of combat sports, specifically the sweet science of boxing, that pivot point has a name, James J. Corbett.
John Jim.
The man who basically single-handedly dragged prize fighting out of the Dark Ages. We're talking about a figure who is fundamentally the dividing line. Before Corbett, you have bare-knuckle brawling, which was, well, it was barely distinguishable from a street fight. After Corbett, you have modern professional athletics.
But here is the thing that I'm struggling to wrap my head around, and I want to get into this right away. When you look at the hard men of the 1880s, the guys fighting on the docks in the back rooms of saloons, they are terrifying figures. They are scarred, they are missing teeth, they are literal thugs. And then you have Corbett.
Right.
He's a bank clerk.
A bank clerk who wore custom-tailored suits and pomaded his hair.
Exactly. So the mission for this deep dive is pretty specific. We want to figure out how a bank clerk from San Francisco who wanted to be a Shakespearean actor and was rumored to have a college education managed to walk into the most brutal environment on Earth, beat the toughest men on the planet, and invent the modern athlete in the process.
It is a massive paradox, isn't it?
It really is. We're going to break down the specific science he invented. We're going to look at how he became the first sex symbol in sports history, which is a wild story on its own. And we're going to dissect the specific physiological vulnerability that eventually brought him down.
And just to set the table for everyone listening, we are basing this deep dive on a really comprehensive collection of biographical records, fight histories from the late 19th and early 20th centuries, and cultural notes spanning his entire life from 1866 to 1933.
So let's dive right into the origin story. Because Gentleman Jim wasn't just a clever marketing nickname, was it?
No, not at all. And I think to understand Corbett, you really have to understand the world he was born into. James John Corbett was born in San Francisco in 1866. His father, Patrick Corbett, was an immigrant from County Mayo, Ireland.
And if mother had Scottish ancestry.
Right. Now, typically, the Irish immigrant boxer profile of the 1880s is a very specific trope. It usually involves extreme poverty, growing up in the slums, fighting in the streets for scraps of food. I mean, you fought because you had literally no other economic option. It was fight or starve.
But that wasn't Corbett's life.
Not even close. And this is the first major deviation. Corbett's family was stable. He didn't drop out of school to work in a coal mine. He actually graduated from Sacred Heart High School in San Francisco.
And the notes mentioned there were persistent rumors that he even had a college education.
Which, honestly, in the boxing world of the 1880s, would make him a unicorn. Whether he officially finished college or not is debated, but he was highly educated, he was articulate, he read literature. And as you mentioned, he had a legitimate day job.
The Nevada Bank.
He worked as a clerk at the Nevada Bank in San Francisco. I want you to really picture this context. Imagine walking into your local bank branch today. You're there to make a deposit. The guy behind the counter is polite, he's well-dressed, he's good with numbers, and unbeknownst to you, that same guy is arguably the most dangerous, unarmed combatant on the North American continent.
It just doesn't compute with the stereotype.
It creates a cognitive dissonance. And that dissonance is the absolute key to his gentleman persona. You have to remember, in the late 19th century, prize fighting was illegal in 21 states.
Illegal.
Completely. It was a vice crime. It was categorized right alongside prostitution, gambling syndicates, and public disorder. If you were a boxer, you weren't considered an athlete in the modern sense. You were viewed as a criminal, a thug. Respectable society simply did not associate with prize fighters.
So how does a respectable bank clerk who quotes Shakespeare get pulled into a criminal underworld?
The Olympic Club in San Francisco. This is a crucial piece of the puzzle. San Francisco in the 1880s was a unique ecosystem. It was the tail end of the Wild West, meaning the beginning of the Gilded Age. You had these high society athletic clubs where wealthy men, captains of industry, wanted to learn the manly art of self-defense.
But they obviously didn't want to get their noses broken by a dock worker.
Exactly. They wanted a sparring partner who could teach them, who could push them physically, but who knew how to behave in a locker room full of gentlemen. Corbett bridged that gap perfectly. He could move in high society because of his manners and his job, but he could fight like a demon.
So he was essentially living a double life.
In a way, yes. He was Gentleman Jim, not just because he dressed well, but because his entire demeanor was a rejection of the brute stereotype. He was bringing class to a sport that had absolutely none.
But being polite and having a high school diploma doesn't win fights. If anything, I'd assume the actual thugs would want to tear him apart even more.
Oh, they absolutely did. Which brings us to the scientific approach.
The notes keep referencing this term, scientific boxing. To a modern ear, that sounds like marketing buzzwords, like a shoe company trying to sell you scientific souls. What does it actually mean in the context of 1890?
To understand the solution, you have to understand the problem. Before Corbett, boxing was largely a contest of attrition. It was the stand and bang era.
Walk me through that.
Picture two men. They stand in the center of the ring, often towing the scratch, which was literally a line drawn in the dirt. They plant their feet, and they trade blows.
Just taking turns hitting each other.
Essentially, the defense was minimal. Parrying, maybe. But mostly the strategy was, I am going to hit you, and I am tough enough to take whatever you hit me with. It was about who had the thicker skull, the harder punch, and the higher pain tolerance. It was a test of durability, not skill.
So the strategy was just endure.
Precision was non-existent. Footwork was non-existent. Corbett looked at this and realized something fundamental. The human head is a heavy object, and the neck is a pivot point. If you move your feet, the target moves.
That seems incredibly obvious.
To us, living in the post-Corbett world, it seems like common sense. But back then, it was revolutionary. Corbett didn't just decide to move. He treated the ring like a geometry problem. He realized that if he stepped 6 inches to the left, his opponent's right hand physically couldn't reach him without the opponent resetting his feet.
He was hacking the system.
He was. He prioritized technique, speed, and tactical methods over sheer power. He wanted to hit without getting hit.
Which I imagine the old guard hated.
They despised it. They called it running. They called it cowardly. They said stand and fight like a man. But Corbett argued it was intelligence. He utilized the jab, a punch that was barely used as an offensive weapon at the time.
Wait, the jab wasn't used. That's boxing 101.
In the bare knuckle and early gloved era, the jab was seen as a weak nuisance. You wanted to throw the power hand. Corbett realized that the jab could be a rangefinder. It could be a disruption tool. He could snap your head back, blind you for a split second, and then circle away before you could retaliate.
But here's the catch. You can't just decide to dance around a ring for 40 rounds. That takes a completely different kind of energy than just standing still and absorbing punches.
And that is the second pillar of his legacy, the training camp.
I saw the list of his daily routine in the notes. Road work, calisthenics, bag work, sparring drills. It looks like a modern CrossFit schedule or a serious MMA camp.
It looks normal to us. That's the point. Before Corbett, training for a championship fight was loose.
How loose?
A fighter might go chop some wood for manual labor strength. They might do a little bit of sparring. They would probably stop drinking whiskey maybe a week before the fight. That was about it.
So the bar was low.
The bar was on the floor. Corbett introduced a strict regimen. He treated his body like a machine that needed specific inputs to get specific outputs.
Talk to me about road work.
He ran miles every morning. This was about building aerobic capacity. He realized that if he wanted to be a scientific boxer who moved constantly dancing, circling, feinting, he needed an engine that wouldn't quit. He needed cardiovascular endurance that the stand and bang guys simply didn't possess.
He was professionalizing the preparation.
He was the first athlete to treat his sport as a full-time job requiring 24-hour discipline. If you see a modern boxer running 5 miles at 5 a.m. wearing a hoodie, sweating it out, they are walking in Corbett's footsteps. That structure comes directly from him.
Okay, so he has the theory. He has the fitness. But theories are great until you get punched in the face.
Yeah.
He needs to prove it works against a real killer. And looking at the record, the first real test, the one that really matters, is Peter Jackson in 1891.
The Black Prince, Peter Jackson. This is one of the great what-ifs and tragedies of boxing history.
Why tragedy?
Because Jackson was a phenomenal fighter. He was technical, he was strong, he was brilliant. In the eyes of many experts of the day, he was the true best fighter in the world. But the champion, John L. Sullivan, drew the color line.
He refused to fight a black man.
Sullivan openly refused to defend the title against black challengers. So Jackson was the uncrowned king. He was the guy that everyone knew was dangerous, but the system locked him out.
And Corbett steps up.
Corbett steps up. Now think about the risk and reward here. Fighting Jackson was incredibly dangerous. Jackson was avoided by the champ for a reason. If Corbett loses, he's just another guy. But Corbett didn't care about the color line. He cared about proving he was the best.
They were crosstown rivals in San Francisco, right?
Both were instructors at prestigious athletic clubs. So this started as a battle for local dominance in the Bay Area, but it turned into an absolute marathon.
The record says no contest. But then I look at the duration. 61 rounds.
61 rounds.
Stop. How is that physically possible?
It's barely possible. We are talking about 4 hours of combat.
4 hours. I can't even watch a movie for 4 hours without getting restless.
Imagine fighting for your life for 4 hours. By the end, both men were essentially zombies. Their arms were heavy as lead. They could barely lift them to defend themselves. The referee finally called it a no contest, not because of a rule violation, but because the men were simply too exhausted to continue effectively.
It was a stalemate.
But for Corbett, this was a massive victory.
How so?
Because he had gone 61 rounds with the boogeyman. He had stood toe-to-toe with Peter Jackson, the man the great John L. Sullivan was afraid of, and he hadn't cracked. It proved that the pretty boy from the bank was made of iron.
It validated the gas tank.
It validated everything. It proved his stamina, his toughness, and his chin. And suddenly, there was a massive national demand. The public said, we need to see this guy fight Sullivan.
And Sullivan was the legend.
Sullivan was larger than life, the Boston strong boy. He was the first American sports superstar. He was famous in a way that people hadn't been famous before. But by 1892, he was getting older, he was getting heavier, and he was reluctant.
But the money was there.
The money and the pressure. So the date was set. September 7, 1892, the Olympic Club in New Orleans.
New Orleans. I could only imagine the atmosphere.
It was electric. And we have to mention the rules again. This was the first heavyweight championship fight fought under the Marquess of Queensberry rules.
Meaning gloves.
Gloves. Now, I want to clarify a common misconception here. People often think gloves were introduced to make the sport safer.
Right. Padding for the head.
Incorrect. Gloves were introduced to protect the hands. In bare-knuckle boxing, you cannot hit someone in the forehead with full force because the human skull is harder than the human hand. You will break your metacarpals. So bare-knuckle fights were often slower with more body shots.
So gloves actually allow you to punch harder.
Gloves allow you to punch the head with full force without shattering your hand. This transition favored Corbett. It favored volume striking. It favored the science.
The notes mentioned something really interesting about the buildup. Corbett actually sparred with Sullivan beforehand.
A massive tactical error by Sullivan. They did a short exhibition on a stage in San Francisco, just light sparring in tuxedos, essentially. But in those few minutes, Corbett realized something terrifyingly simple.
Oh, was it?
I can see everything he's doing. Sullivan was slow. He telegraphed his punches. He wound up before he threw. Corbett realized right then and there, I'm faster than him. I can beat him.
So fast forward to the fight itself. Sullivan rushes him right. That was his style, the bull.
He rushed him like a bull. Sullivan came out of his corner looking to take Corbett's head off in the first minute. But Corbett didn't stand there. He utilized that geometry we talked about. He sidestepped, he feinted.
A pop.
A stiff jab to the nose. And then he was gone.
It must have been infuriating for Sullivan.
Sullivan was swinging at a ghost. He was throwing haymakers that were hitting nothing but humid New Orleans air. And every time he missed, he got tired. And every time he reset, Corbett popped him again.
He was matadoring him.
Perfectly. Round after round, Sullivan was getting frustrated, he was bleeding, and his energy was draining away. The crowd, which had come to see Sullivan crush the dandy, started to turn. They realized they were watching a masterclass.
And then the climax.
Round 21. Sullivan is exhausted. He's standing on unsteady legs. Corbett unleashes a combination, not a lucky punch, but a tactical rapid-fire combination. Sullivan goes down.
The giant falls.
The Boston strong boy hit the canvas, and for the first time in his career, he couldn't get up. He was counted out.
That moment, I mean, that's the birth of modern boxing history right there.
It is. It's the birth of the man who beat the man lineage. You can trace the heavyweight championship in a direct, unbroken line from Corbett's victory over Sullivan all the way to the champions of today, like Usyk or Fury. It marked the definitive end of the brute force era. Tactical boxing had won.
So Corbett is the champ. He's the man.
Mm,
But looking at his record, he didn't actually defend the title that much, did he?
no, and this is where we have to look at the business of boxing in the 1890s. Corbett was a non-fighting champion by today's standards.
Why is that? Was he dodging people?
Not necessarily. You have to remember there were no boxing commissions. There was no governing body mandating a title defense every 6 months. And again, the illegality. Arranging a fight was a logistical nightmare, a hit-and-miss proposition. You had to find a state that would look the other way or build a secret arena or bribe the local sheriff.
Right, you couldn't just book Madison Square Garden easily.
Exactly. But there was another reason. Corbett viewed the championship differently. To him, the belt was a promotional tool.
For his acting.
For his acting and his exhibitions, he made his real money on the stage. Being the heavyweight champion of the world meant he could sell out theaters for his plays and his monologues.
So he was monetizing the title without getting punched.
Precisely. He was a big money fighter. He didn't want to risk the title in a dangerous fight for small change. He was maximizing his brand.
He was the first modern brand.
He was. And speaking of brand, this brings us to a really fascinating aspect of Corbett's life. He was arguably the first modern sports sex symbol.
The notes say the catalyst for this was a movie.
Yes. We'll get to the specific fight later, but generally when film technology emerged, it changed the demographics of the audience.
How so?
Well, before film, the only way to see a prize fight was to physically go to one. And those venues were rough. They were smoky, full of gambling, spitting, swearing men. No respectable woman would be caught dead there. But a film could be shown in a theater or a kinetoscope parlor. Women could go see that.
And when they saw Corbett,
They liked what they saw. Corbett was handsome. He was athletic. He moved with grace. He wasn't a scarred-up gargoyle like some of the other fighters. He popularized boxing with a female audience in a way that had never happened before.
he really was a media pioneer.
And
We see here that in 1894, he starred in Corbett and Courtney before the kinetograph.
filmed at Thomas Edison's Black Maria studio.
That is wild to think about. Thomas Edison, the Wizard of Menlo Park, filming the heavyweight champ.
It was only the second boxing match ever recorded. Edison later called Corbett the oldest living film star. Corbett understood the power of the medium before almost anyone else. He was writing autobiographies like The Roar of the Crowd, which was serialized in the Saturday Evening Post. He was managing his image across multiple platforms, print stage, and this brand new thing called motion pictures.
It's incredible. He's doing the 21st Century Athlete Playbook in 1894. But as we know in sports, you can't stay the champ forever, especially if you rarely fight. Eventually, someone is going to catch you.
Yeah.
And that someone was Bob Fitzsimmons.
Ruby Robert, the Cornishman.
What a character.
A fascinating contrast to Corbett. Fitzsimmons was a weird-looking guy. He was balding, he had spindly little legs, but he had a torso like a barrel and unparalleled punching power. And the dynamic here was intense. Fitzsimmons absolutely hated Corbett.
Why? Just competitive drive.
It was personal. Corbett had a sharp tongue. He was the gentleman, but he could be very insulting publicly. He had mocked Fitzsimmons, calling him a freak and making fun of his appearance. Fitzsimmons held a deep, burning grudge.
So they meet in Carson City, Nevada, 1897.
A legendary setting. A custom arena built in the middle of nowhere to avoid legal trouble.
And for the first half of the fight, it looked like another Corbett masterclass.
It did. Corbett was faster. He was landing at will. He was cutting Fitzsimmons up. He even knocked Fitzsimmons down in the 6th round. It looked like the science was winning again. Fitzsimmons' face was a mess. He was bleeding from the mouth and nose.
But Fitzsimmons was known for being tough.
It was made of leather. He kept coming. And here is where we get one of those moments that feels like a movie script, but it's actually in the historical record.
The voice from the crowd.
Yes. Fitzsimmons' wife, Rose, was ringside.
Which was unusual in itself, right?
Highly unusual, but she was there. And she saw something. She saw that while Corbett was busy battering Bob's face, Corbett was keeping his hands high. He was protecting his head, but his body was completely open.
So she yells out.
She screams, "Hit him in the slats, Bob."
The slats.
Meaning the ribs, the abdominal area, the slats.
And Bob listened.
He adjusted his strategy immediately. He changed levels. He started digging hooks into Corbett's stomach.
Why is that so effective?
Because body shots are insidious. If you get hit in the head, adrenaline can sometimes mask the pain. You might be dazed, but you can keep fighting on instinct. But body shots, they sap your energy, they take your legs away. It's like a slow leak in a tire.
The scientific Corbett started to slow down.
His movement became sluggish. He couldn't dance away as fast. The gas tank that saved him against Peter Jackson was being drained by blunt force trauma to the ribs.
And then came the 14th round?
The solar plexus punch.
Just the name of it sounds painful. Break that down for us. What actually happened?
Fitzsimmons feinted a blow to the head. Corbett raised his guard to block it. This left the center of his body completely exposed. Fitzsimmons stepped in and drove a stiff left hand right into the pit of the stomach, the solar plexus.
And physiologically, what does that do?
It's a dense cluster of nerves. When you get hit there with that kind of force, it shocks the system. It temporarily paralyzes the diaphragm.
So you can't breathe.
You are suffocating. But here's the horror of it. You are fully conscious.
The source says Corbett couldn't regain his feet.
He was writhing on the canvas. He was clawing at his chest. His mind was screaming, "Get up, get up!" But his legs simply wouldn't obey. He watched the referee count him out.
Over an hour and a half of fighting, and it ends with one perfect body shot.
It was the punch heard round the world. Corbett was devastated. He couldn't believe it. He thought it was a fluke. He thought he'd just overtrained and lost his stamina. He immediately offered a massive sum, $30,000, which is huge money in 1897 for a rematch.
But Fitzsimmons said no.
He refused. He said he would never fight Corbett again.
That seems petty.
It was vengeance. He knew it would torture Corbett to lose the title and never get a chance to win it back. He chose to fight James J. Jeffries instead. He denied Corbett the satisfaction.
That has to burn. Losing your title and never getting the chance to win it back from the guy who beat you.
It did. But that refusal by Fitzsimmons sets the stage for what many historians consider Corbett's masterpiece. Even though, well, spoiler alert, it's a masterpiece in defeat.
This is the fight against James J. Jeffries in 1900.
Right. So Fitzsimmons eventually loses the title to Jeffries. Now we have to talk about Jeffries. This guy was an absolute monster.
Big.
Huge, strong, and ironically, he used to be Corbett's sparring partner. He learned the trade from Corbett. He knew all of Corbett's tricks.
And Corbett is now 34 years old. In boxing years, especially back then, that's ancient.
He had been on the sidelines. He was semi-retired, but the hunger was still there. He challenges the new champion. The fight is set for Coney Island.
The odds must have been massively against him.
Heavily. Corbett was giving up size strength and about 30 pounds in weight, plus the 7-year age gap. Jeffries was in his prime. Corbett was the old man. Everyone expected Corbett to get crushed.
But Corbett had a plan.
He prepared like a Spartan. He went back to that strict regimen. He knew he couldn't stand and trade with Jeffries. One clean shot from Jeffries would end it. His only path to victory was to use his legs, his speed, and his stamina to last the 25-round limit and win on points.
25 rounds.
That was the distance.
And for 22 of them, she put on a clinic.
It was unbelievable. They called him the dancing master. He was 34 fighting a giant, and he was untouchable. He darted and popped Jeffries with a jab and danced away before Jeffries could even wind up. Jeffries couldn't lay a glove on him.
It was the perfection of the style he invented.
It was. He was making the heavyweight champion of the world look like a clumsy amateur.
The notes say Jeffries' corner was panicking.
Absolute panic. By the 20th round, it was clear Jeffries was losing every single round. Jeffries' manager, William Brady, who ironically used to manage Corbett years before, realized his fighter was being humiliated. He actually fired the trainer right there in the corner.
Mid-fight?
Mid-fight. He shoved the trainer aside, leaned into Jeffries' face and screamed, "He is making a fool of you. Knock him out or lose your title."
The pressure is on. Round 23. Corbett is just a few minutes away from regaining the heavyweight championship of the world at age 34.
He just had to stay upright. He just had to keep moving. But fatigue. Fatigue is the enemy of science. Corbett's legs were getting heavy. Jeffries was stalking him desperate.
What happened?
Midway through the 23rd, Jeffries threw a punch. Corbett leaned back to avoid it, a move he had done 1,000 times. But he miscalculated his position in the ring.
Oh, no.
He bumped into the ropes.
The tiny contact.
That tiny bounce, it pushed him forward just an inch. It kept him stationary for a split second, and that was all Jeffries needed. He caught Corbett with a short right hand.
And that was it.
That was it. KO. One mistake in 2 hours of perfection.
That is heartbreaking.
It is. But here's the fascinating thing. The public reaction. Usually the loser is forgotten, but the public embraced Corbett for this. They saw a 34-year-old man, smaller and older, completely outclass the giant for nearly 2 hours, only to get caught at the very end. They considered it his finest performance.
It proved that his science worked even if his body eventually failed him against a giant.
Precisely. It solidified his legend more than some of his wins did. It showed that mind could triumph over matter right up until the point where matter lands a right hook.
So after that, he's really in the twilight of his career.
He fought Jeffries one more time in 1903 at age 37. But the magic was fading. He survived a bad body blow in the second, but was knocked out in the 10th.
And there was a controversy with the fight against Kid McCoy.
Yeah, a win that is generally believed to be a fix. It's a reminder that boxing was still a murky business, and even the gentleman wasn't completely immune to the shady side of it.
So he hangs up the gloves. But he doesn't disappear.
And not at all. He goes back to his first love, which was acting. He appeared in low-budget films, vaudeville minstrel shows, which we should note for context were a very common form of entertainment at the time, and really leaned into being the elder statesman. He performed with Cornelius J. O'Brien and starred in movies like The Midnight Man and The Prince of Avenue A.
He lived out his days in Queens Right, Bayside.
Bayside, Queens. On a street that was eventually named after him, Corbett Road, he lived a comfortable, respected life.
There is one last story in the records that I really love. It's from 1924. Corbett is almost 60 years old.
It is a charming story.
And he gets in the ring with Gene Tunney.
This is a beautiful passing of the torch moment. Gene Tunney was the future champion. And Tunney was very much like Corbett. He was an intellectual, he studied the game, he was a scientific boxer. He completely idolized Corbett.
And they sparred.
They sparred. And Tunney was amazed. He claimed that even at 60 years old, Corbett's defense was incredible. He said it was like trying to hit smoke. He even went as far as saying Corbett's defensive skills were better than Benny Leonard's, who was considered the defensive wizard of that specific era.
That's incredibly high praise. It shows that the science Corbett developed wasn't just about youth and athleticism. It was a true knowledge base that stayed with him.
It was intellectual property. He understood the art of movement better than anyone. He knew where to be and, more importantly, where not to be.
Corbett passed away in 1933 from liver cancer at the age of 66. But his legacy... we started this by calling him the pivot point.
He is the father of modern boxing. There is no other way to put it. He shifted the entire paradigm. Before him, the central question was, how hard can you hit? After him, the question became, how well can you move?
And that ripple effect touches everything in sports culture.
It does. You see it in pop culture. Errol Flynn even played him in the movie Gentleman Jim. But practically speaking, every time you see a fighter watching game tape, that's Corbett. Every time you see a fighter following a strict diet, that's Corbett. Every time you see an athlete managing their own brand, wearing custom suits and talking to the press, they are walking down the path that Gentleman Jim paved.
He literally wrote the playbook.
He took a brutal brawl and turned it into a business and a science.
It's amazing to think that a bank clerk from San Francisco did all that.
It really is.
Before we wrap up, there's one thing that sticks with me.
Yeah.
We talked about Mrs. Fitzsimmons yelling, hit him in the slats.
Yes.
Corbett lost his title because of that specific piece of advice. In an era before coaches had headsets or could easily communicate during the chaos of a fight, it really makes you wonder.
It raises a fascinating question about the sheer randomness of history.
Exactly. How many sporting histories were altered not by the athletes, not by the coaches, but by a single voice in the audience that just happened to be heard at the exact right moment?
It's the butterfly effect of sports. One shout, one change in tactics, one punch, and the entire lineage of the heavyweight championship changes forever.
Something to think about the next time you're shouting at the TV or from the stands. You never know who might be listening.
Indeed.
That's it for this deep dive into the life of Gentleman Jim Corbett. Thanks for exploring this with us.